Hopefully. But
Okay, guys, we are live. Hi, Natasha. Welcome to one of my first webinars hosted as Ignite. I do them all the time with Nutrition Academy, but I wanted to do some interview series with some experts in the field of gut health. So you're actually one of the first people I've interviewed. So welcome.
well, thank you, Andrea. It's nice to be a part of this and see how it goes.
For sure. For those of you that don't know, Natasha and I met at the Gut Microbiome for Health conference in Paris. We had a brief chance to say hello to each other at a different conference prior to going, but then we got to spend 3 lovely days together at a conference in Paris. So it was a lot of fun. We ate lots of good food, learned a ton about the gut microbiome. And so I really wanted to bring her on to ask her a little bit more about gut health, the gut microbiome, and make sure that I gave you guys some really good information from a different perspective. So Natasha's a registered dietitian. She has her master's degree and she studied probiotics for that. And now she is moving on to do her PhD. She's at the University of BC in the Okanagan. All of us wish we were there with you right now, drinking some wine. And she is studying the area of the diet and how it impacts the gut microbiome. So she is a wealth of knowledge. She's an expert in digestive health, and we are so lucky to have her here talking with us today.
Thank you.
So why don't we jump into it then? Natasha, why don't you tell me a little bit about you outside of work, I guess, since I just touched on some of your professional stuff, as well as what you do.
Okay, well, just a little bit about myself. You've sort of given a great intro, Andrea. I've actually very proud to be a dietitian. I've been a dietitian for almost 20 years, so I can't believe that time has flown, but it does when you're having a great time. I've been fortunate to work with a variety of different populations from the neonatal baby all the way up to elderly. Had a relatively diverse career from working in the community to clinical settings. And then the last few years before I chose to do my PhD, I actually had the opportunity to work with over 100 dietetic interns as their internship coordinator. So very diverse career, but I guess my whole passion has always been digestive health. Outside of work, my passions are, I have 2 little Jack Russell Terriers, Jake and Lily. I would never recommend anyone getting a Jack Russell Terrier. They're hidden right now so they don't pop up and jump on the screen. But I'm also enjoying life in Kelowna. I'm very much of a food lover, believe in local food consumption, as well as love wine. So all the new vintages are out, so get to experience that. So
That's so awesome. I've
yeah.
been to Kelowna once and I just loved it. I golfed, I drank wine, checked out the town. It was lovely. So you're very lucky to live there. Hopefully, the novelty doesn't ever wear off for you. Uh, I'm sure it won't, considering that you live there later in life, but it's just so nice out there. It's such a great place to live.
Yeah, I'm pretty new, so I've only been here about 4 months. I'm Saskatchewan born and grown, so have lived through the harsh prairie winters, and I'm telling you, winter is nothing here. After you,
No kidding. Somebody else I was hosting a webinar with this morning said there's a lot of snow in Saskatchewan today, so you are lucky, lucky.
um,
Okay, so that's really great. It's funny because you're like, don't get a Jack Russell Terrier, but dogs might play a role and pets might play a role in the gut microbiome. Hey,
right.
we'll touch on that though. So, tell us a little bit about your story or how you ended up interested in gut health.
Well, I honestly can say I obviously must be some sort of a gut nerd to, finish my first degree and internship and be a dietitian for a few years, go back and do a master's, and then actually give up a very well-paying job to do a PhD. So I just have this passion in gut health, and actually, how it actually all started was through my master's work. my master's work did focus in on probiotics in children that had inflammatory bowel disease. And what was really interesting at the time, and this was only about 10 years ago, when we talked about probiotics, it was virtually unheard of. People really, well, certainly the medical community did not embrace the word probiotic yet. No one really knew what they were. And it seemed like the literature or the science was just starting to come out, and it seemed quite promising. So as I worked through my master's and learned more about these little bacteria, it just completely fascinated me. And what's interesting is that things have totally shifted. So now there's more research coming out on the gut microbiome than actually probiotics. And so in 2016, they saw over 3,000 publications, scientific publications. It's insane. In 2007, there was only 30. So you can see how hot this particular area is. And I think what's wonderful is that it's offering new promise to patients that do live with digestive issues.
That's so important, right? Because for so many years, and everyone knows, April's IBS Awareness Month, and I have a really big campaign going on right now to improve knowledge around IBS. And for years, it was, eat more fiber, and, this is a disease that you just have to learn to manage. And now things are shifting, and it's even more exciting in areas like IBD, like liver disease, where we're starting to understand how the gut microbiome plays a role, and potentially, hopefully down the road, how to manipulate the gut microbiome to have better health outcomes.
Exactly. So, and that's really where my PhD is focused, is looking at, can diet actually impact the gut microbiota? And I mean, there's certainly lots of different types of research coming out on this particular area, but I'm focusing in more on patients that do have, in this case, ulcerative colitis. But I do think there's certainly promise in this area for individuals that do have IBS, Crohn's, colitis, as well as other disorders.
That's great. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about your research and how that's shaping up?
Well, I can certainly give a general idea of what we're looking at, because I think it's really confusing right now, because there's a lot of books and blogs and websites, and they're saying, if you eat this, it cures your microbiome, and unfortunately the science isn't there yet. So I want to help get the science there. And one piece of it is just taking a diet and administering it to a group of people. And we're actually going to look at, does this whole diet, not just a piece of food, like, for example, if we look at an apple, does that change your gut microbiota? But a whole diet, if we change your whole eating pattern, will that affect your gut microbiota? Will it affect your disease and how it affects you, like your symptoms? And will it affect your immune system? And there's really not a lot of research yet on that area. So that's what I'm looking into. And hopefully we'll have answers in 2 or 3 years.
That's awesome. That's so great to see that you're looking at an entire, or a diet as a whole, right? Because I always say when people are looking at, specific nutrients or looking at those holy grails to manage their nutrition, that oftentimes it's not that one food component that's going to result in health outcomes. It's how that food interacts with all the other foods you're having, and what the bigger picture is, and what the diet does look like as a whole. So I think it's really valuable that your research is taking that kind of larger approach to, okay, this particular intervention where we look at all of these different components, how does that influence disease?
Exactly. Yeah, it seems like, well, we know that all these different bits and pieces impact our gut microbiota, but what does the diet as a whole? And in general, like, we don't eat just one food, we eat a variety of foods. So that's why it's important.
That's great. So where do you hope this project will lead?
Well, I mean, like I'm saying, I'm hoping it'll give us a few answers, at least in the population that I'm working with, that if we do adjust our diet, it can have an influence. Even when it comes to inflammatory bowel disease, and as well as IBS, there's certainly lots of papers published and lots of different diets, but there's still a little bit of confusion and consensus on like, okay, well, what is the diet? I think IBS is a little bit further ahead when we do see really good benefit with the FODMAP diet. However, with colitis and Crohn's, we're still trying to sort that out. And I did do a recent thorough literature review, and it was really confusing for me as a professional. It's one study says this is good and then the next one says it's not. So that's what I'm kind of looking for, and hopefully these recommendations will actually transfer over to other disease states as well. Whether it works or not, it still will give us answers that, well, at least we know this pattern doesn't work, but we'll try a different one, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. I'm not sure if you're able to tell me, but are you able to tell me what particular diet pattern you're looking at, or are you guys still sussing that out in terms of coming up with your study design?
Sussing that out, but it's not an extreme diet pattern. A lot of it is changing the type of fats we eat, incorporating more fresh fruits and vegetables, and because those have the fiber sources and antioxidants and things like that. So we're not supplementing with any particular product, I should say. And it almost seems like it's not flashy enough, but there's certainly some good scientific evidence to say if you bring a lot of these pieces together, it could be beneficial.
That's awesome. So the diet as a whole, guys, one thing isn't going to make or break your nutrition, and one thing is not going to fix it either. So that's great. So moving a little bit away from your research, I would love for you to share some of your knowledge with the audience. So my first question for you is how are gut health and IBS related?
Well, one thing that's actually quite interesting, and it's become quite clear in the literature, especially when it comes to irritable bowel syndrome, is that we're seeing that there's these alterations in the bacteria of individuals that are living with irritable bowel syndrome. And so when they compare those individuals that, say, don't have a health condition, and we believe that they're generally healthy, the bacteria between these two groups are actually quite different. And they actually feel that these bacteria, the differences in these bacteria actually might be responsible for some of the symptoms that individuals with irritable bowel syndrome are faced with. So that's one thing that is actually quite interesting, and I guess there's quite a lot of evidence to support that. What it's caused from, we don't know. There's lots of speculation. However, they do see those differences. And so and what's interesting is that these bacteria can actually contribute to not only your typical things you would think of like gas, bloating, but even the pain. They could be responsible for the pain in our digestive tract because there's this gut-brain connection. So the bacteria in our gut are linked to our brain and vice versa. A very, very fascinating area that's emerging right now. So it's not only looking after our gut, but now we need to be also looking after our whole selves, and that includes the mind because it has influence.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's kind of that like a chicken or the egg, right? Is it, our stress, what's going on in our brain that's inappropriately communicating with our gut? Is it our gut inappropriately communicating with our brain? Sounds likely that it's a mix of both. However, it's very cool that research is starting to see those connections, and hopefully one day we'll have, some really good sound recommendations around that.
Yeah, exactly. It is challenging right now because it is the chicken or egg scenario. They're still trying to sort that piece out, but when they look at things as in black and white, okay, yeah, why is this person's bacteria different than this person's? And it seems like if there's certain bacteria there, they cause those symptoms, or if they're missing, those sorts of things. So,
Exactly. So I guess I should have probably asked this question to begin with, but I'd love for you to explain to people what the gut microbiome is, because when you look at blogs and you hear things on media, I think there's a lot of misinformation there. So, from a researcher, dietitian, scientist perspective, how would you describe the gut microbiome in a way that, is based in evidence, but is also makes sense to people?
Okay. Yeah, there certainly is confusion. I think when the word microbiome is mentioned, everybody's mind just seems to go to the gut, and that's what it is. And in fact, it's much larger than that. We actually, our whole body is a microbiome. It's almost like its own world. So the microbiome actually consists of a variety of surfaces on our body. So our nose has its own particular microbiome. Our mouth does. Our digestive tract does. Even our skin, in women, their vaginal tract. So all over the body have these different microbiomes. They constitute the whole microbiome, I should say. Each area of the body has different types of bacteria that live in that particular area. But it's not only the bacteria. Bacteria actually have little genes on them. So these genes actually tell the bacteria how to function. So although we're trying to identify all these different types of bacteria on our body, now they're trying to figure out, okay, these bacteria also have genes which have different functions. An example might be one bacteria might interact with the immune system. One bacteria's role might be to break down carbohydrates. There's thousands and thousands of different functions that scientists are trying to figure out. So that's another component of our microbiome. But the third piece I would say constitutes our microbiome is where we live and what we do. So when you mentioned the piece around pets, like even having a pet can influence our microbiome. Where we live, like as far as if I live in Saskatchewan versus Kelowna, there's different bacteria in the environment, which may actually influence my gut microbiome, what we eat, all those sorts of things, medications we take. So it's a much larger picture than just, oh, there's bacteria in our intestines and that's a microbiome. It's the whole body. Mm-hmm. And they actually are what is associated with health and well-being.
For sure. And I think, we tend to simplify things to look for specific answers or to say, okay, we have a solution to this one particular thing. And lots of times I find media, blogs do that, but you're totally right. Bacteria is more complicated in that they also have functions and jobs, and those jobs can be different in your bowels and different in your lungs and different in your nose. And depending on their genome, they might do different things in our body and interact with different, nutrients and chemicals differently. So it's so complicated and science is getting there, but we're just scratching the surface now.
Exactly. Yeah.
In fact, when we were at that conference, I hadn't, prior to looking at the program, hadn't heard of the term virome before. And so it's crazy in that we're starting to look at viruses too, and how they, play a role in our body and how they're actually important. They're not all bad. So I think it's exciting where research is going for sure. Yeah. So what is the biggest piece of misinformation you hear on the gut microbiome in the media?
Well, where do I begin?
Good question. Below 500.
I'll just get down to a couple of things that I think kind of irk me as a dietitian the most. I think it's just, and I shouldn't say that. The challenge is that there's so much science coming out, but the translation of that knowledge is much less rapid, I should say. So, people are doing their best to try and translate this information, but it's even overwhelming for someone that's just, turn their focus and trying to learn more about this area. So I guess one of the first things I would say is, when we start talking about a healthy microbiota, what's interesting is that we actually don't even know what constitutes that healthy microbiota. And what the challenge with that is that when it comes to recommendations, if we don't know what the healthy person should have, how can we recommend a specific diet right now, or even certain probiotics? So right now, we're still trying to understand what that healthy gut microbiota looks like. There's some theories that they think, yes, this is what should be in there. They know there's differences between healthy and those individuals that have chronic conditions. But what's interesting is that everyone's is so different, because obviously we are exposed to so many different things. We eat differently. The list goes on and on. But with that said, I think we'll know that answer in the next 2 to 3 years. That's how fast the research is increasing. But to say we know what the perfect gut microbiota looks like right now, it still eludes us, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. That's exciting, though. 2 to 3 years. Whew.
Well, maybe.
Hopefully. It's very cool to see what labs are doing now and how quickly the technology is advancing, though. You're definitely right. Yeah. So another quick question while we're on the topic of misinformation, I know this is kind of near and dear to your heart, is when it comes to what probiotics are and kind of consumer misinformation, because the other day I went to the superstore and saw like a smoothie style juice that said probiotic, and it kind of, oh my gosh, they're starting to market this because they know it's something people are interested in. So I think it'd be really valuable for people to understand what is actually a probiotic, and how there's lots of misinformation out there from a consumer perspective. Are you able to share with us what the definition of a probiotic is?
Yeah, I think the biggest misconception with probiotics is that, or a company can just go and take this bacteria and put it into a particular product. And actually, for something to have the claim probiotic in it, it must have had some very rigorous scientific studies completed on that particular probiotic. So the company should have taken that particular product, provided it to a group of individuals, and those individuals actually consume that particular product. And we actually should be able to isolate those bacteria in their stool. And so a lot of times probiotics, there could be some mismarketing, I should say, and that's saying, well, if you take this particular product, you're going to have all these health benefits. The only thing right now the company can say is that it might contribute to a healthy gut flora, and that would have had to have gone through Health Canada claims. However, we really don't know if it has a huge health benefit in the end. So you really have to be buyer beware. And the easiest thing or the best thing you can do is actually go to the website or ask the company, what kind of studies have you done, or have you done some studies on your particular product? And sometimes they might not be able to produce any. So they're just kind of just guessing, like, yeah, we'll just put this probiotic in. It's a great thing to market our product as, and hopefully it works.
They are banking on what's trendy, and they're banking on you to not ask questions and assume that their product's superior because of it. So, keep in mind that you should talk to your doctor or dietitian before assuming that a probiotic food product, is going to be helpful or beneficial in any way.
Yeah, especially if there's a price difference. You want to know that what you're paying for, you're actually getting some benefit. And, there are some products out there and some reputable companies that have done their research. So, and I think the best thing to do is talk to your doctor or dietitian, because it really does. It's really confusing. And at least, we take the time. It's our role to look these products up, contact the company, and get the answers.
For sure. Absolutely. So this is such a leading question. I can't even believe I wrote it down, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Why are dietitians so important to helping manage gut health? Wink, wink.
Well, I obviously, a little bit biased here, but really what it comes down to is that we are trained in science. We are bound to ethics. We have to provide recommendations that are evidence-based or based in science. And I think it's really, really important. We're not here to make millions of dollars. Oh, maybe we are. No, I'm just kidding. But
one can dream. Maybe by the lottery.
But we're here to provide, translate that scientific knowledge to help individuals manage their disease conditions. And I think we're here to work with other health professionals so you get the best care possible. those are a few things, but I think our practical recommendations are key. Sometimes
Yeah.
they sound very simplistic, but there's a lot of research that goes behind some of those recommendations.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes you're right. Like our messages aren't the sexiest because they're not manipulating research out there. But the fact is we're really helpful in looking at your behaviors, working as a team with your interdisciplinary healthcare team. We're there to really support you in that behavior change. Whereas, you can really easily go online to Reddit and pull up the craziest nutrition recommendations ever. However, who knows if they're safe? Who knows who provided them? And how are they going to fit into your lifestyle? So we really help with that piece of things.
Yeah,
So
and I think safety is my number one concern when it comes to gut health. And I think a lot of people don't realize that by doing certain things, you actually can harm your gut health.
yeah, I think of all of those.
Cleanses
Yeah.
really actually quite scare me because we don't know what that's doing to those bacteria. And we know that those bacteria interact with food we put in our body, or if they use enemas, for example, very dangerous. Like it could make conditions actually worsen. So I think when it comes to even taking the wrong probiotic can interact with your immune system in a way we may not want it to. So it's that safety that
Right.
number one.
Exactly. That's great. Yeah, cleanses irk me. Colon cleanses irk me. And all the time it was like, before I got microbiome research came out, we're like, yeah, that isn't a good idea. What is it achieving? And now with all of this, you're like, oh, this is a really bad idea. We don't know all the answers, but think about it, wiping out the bacteria in your colon, how is that going to influence your digestion and your immune system and all of those important things?
Yeah. We don't want to lose the good bacteria we already have, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, what are your top 3 recommendations for somebody with IBS?
Okay. What I think I can glean from the literature, if you're not going like the FODMAP route or something like that, but really my emphasis is on whole foods. I think we've seen this trend where there's a lot of consumption of fast food, processed foods, because they're quick to prepare. And certainly there's some interesting literature suggesting that a lot of these types of foods are detrimental to our gut microbiota. So simply just going back to cooking good, healthy meals, and consuming whole foods, those foods that do not have a list of ingredients we cannot pronounce and don't understand what they are, really important, I believe, to improving our gut health.
Mm-hmm. I'm of the same mind.
Yeah.
My clients hear it all the day. Eat whole foods, eat whole foods. Let's get back to the kitchen. Let's learn to love cooking again.
Such a simple message, but interesting that the science is starting to support that strongly. Yeah. There's even connections between emulsifier intake and detrimental effects on the gut microbiome. Mm-hmm. And so as more and more research comes out, we're going to see that these high fat, high sugar foods are not good for our gut bacteria.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's more of them than there is of us. So keep them happy and well fed.
Yeah. Another thing is, I know it's not snazzy, but the literature strongly supports fiber intake. Fiber is absolutely crucial because these bacteria live and thrive on fiber sources. So when we deprive them of good sources of fiber, they have nothing to live on and they actually die out. And what we're seeing is that over the year, like when they do have some research from many years ago that our bacteria has changed so much that some of these bacteria do not exist anymore. So they're really a lot of the scientists are really emphasizing that need for more fiber sources into our diet, especially coming from fruit and vegetables. I had mentioned that a little bit earlier, but interestingly enough, the fruit and vegetables have the fiber, but they also have different types of antioxidants that they're seeing are linked with more of a health-associated gut bacteria.
Those phytochemicals.
Chemicals, yeah, polyphenols and things like that. So really, really important. And I think the last thing is the whole rage around fermented foods. Now, fermented foods have those live active cultures in them or good bacteria. We can't necessarily say they're actually probiotic at this point because they don't fall under the strict definition for probiotics, but there's certainly really strong evidence to suggest that fermented foods can be beneficial to gut health. So fermented foods can come from things like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. And I find that in North America, maybe we don't consume enough of these fermented foods in our diet. And so trying to get more of these fermented foods in our diet is actually quite important. And the research is also supporting that piece as well. So I find that quite interesting. So
Yeah, it goes right along with my message to try to eat something living every day. Get out there and try new foods. I found an amazing sauerkraut in my grocery store that has live cultures in it. It's really good. I put it on toast, put it on sandwiches, I put it in wraps. I'm sauerkraut crazy though, so I eat it out of the jar. So yeah, so it's great to see that, when you talk to dietitians who work in this area, we have a good consensus on what we should be doing, and it just reinforces, everything that we already say about healthy eating and nutrition. So I think it's really good that we're seeing that a balanced diet, whole foods, fruits and veg, is showing to be beneficial to gut health. Kind of goes along with all the other disease states and the nutrition information we have out there. So it just kind of reinforces our confidence in those messages. So I think that's key.
yeah.
And the fact is guys, we want to fit these in practically. It's really easy to say, eat 5 servings of veggies a day, but what does that look like and how can you do it? And how can getting into the kitchen and cooking whole foods help you with that, or including fermented foods help you with that? So that's why dietitians are so important. They actually make it practical for you to implement these behavior changes. So they translate the knowledge into practice.
Right.
So is there anything you want to add for us, Natasha?
I don't know. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover. Did you have any questions?
No, I think it's so good to, touch base with you and get your expert opinion. You're such a well-respected researcher in Canada. And so I'm just really excited to have you on, ask you the questions, and get it more from that scientific approach so that people can feel confident in the nutrition decisions they're making.
Yeah, well, it's always nice to share the information. I'm trying to get the information out that as much as possible, like from an evidence-based perspective. And it's nice to have dietitians like yourself working together with not only scientists, but different individuals and different dietitians, and getting that safe, correct, I could say, message out to the general population.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today. We'll hang up the call and then I will chat with you for a couple seconds after. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have questions for Natasha, shoot me an email and I will field them to her as she has time in between her research and wine drinking. And we'll get you all the answers you're looking for. Thank you guys so much. Bye.
Bye.